Hello, everybody. This is Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to be joined by legendary film producer Hawk Koch. Initially, Hawk started his career as an assistant director, working on classic films such as Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, The Way We Were, The Marathon Man, and others. Subsequently, he produced and/or executive produced films such as Gorky Park, Heaven Can Wait, Sliver, The Temp, Wayne's World and its sequel, Collateral Damage, Primal Fear, Frequency, Fracture, and many more. In addition to his great work as a producer, he is also the former president of both the Producers Guild of America as well as the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. On today's episode, we will talk about some of his career highlights, as well as his autobiography called Magic Time, My Life in Hollywood. It is my pleasure to welcome Hawk Koch.
Hi, Michael. Nice to see you. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you on my show. Thank you very much for taking a time out of your schedule. That really means a lot to me. You were introduced to the world of films at a very early stage in your life, obviously because your dad was a famous producer also. And how did you experience this industry back then through the eyes of a little kid?
I honestly didn't know what my dad did. Didn't see him very much, and my mother drove my sister and I up to Colorado because my dad was an assistant director. I found out later on a movie. And we drove up there, got there at night. We were in a cabin. And the next day, my mother said, "You're going with your father." And I was kind of a shy little kid. I used to wrap my face in my mother's dress so nobody could see me. And I really didn't want to go because my father was a big man. And I didn't want to leave my mom at 4 years old. So anyway, they got me in the car. I was crying. And then we drove for, I don't know, about 20 minutes with some other big men. And all of a sudden, I saw smoke on the horizon. It was a beautiful day in Colorado. And I saw teepees, and I saw cowboys, and I saw Indians, and I saw cavalry and horses. And oh my God, I couldn't wait to get out of the car. And I ran into the little Indian village there, and people were running all over the place doing stuff. There were cameras and trucks, but I didn't pay attention to that. And some Indian put me on his knee and told me a story. Turned out it wasn't an Indian. It was a great actor, Ricardo Montalban. And then a few minutes later, somebody on a horse said, "Have you ever been on a horse before?" "No." "Want to go for a ride?" "Yeah." "Of course. Are you kidding?" And somebody put me up in front of him. And I rode around for, I don't know, probably 30 seconds. To me, it was like unbelievable. And the rest of the day I spent with another young kid running around as my father made this movie. And I got home that night, and my father said to my mother, "Guess who gave little Howie his first horseback ride?" And my mother said, "Who?" And my father said, "Clark Gable." And that's kind of how I just got the chills thinking about it again. That's how I kind of started. My dad went from an assistant director to a producer of what we called B movies. Movies in the 1950s, there was always, when you went to the movie theater, there was the big movie, and then there was a second feature. And that's what he made. He made these second features. And so every time I had the chance, summer vacations and holidays, I would go to movie sets. So I kind of grew up on a movie set. And, I always tell people, do what you do best. Well, I've been in the movie business since I was 4 years old. So that's what I knew how to do.
Growing up in this business and growing up in Hollywood and actually being successful in this town is another story. And many people seem to have trouble dealing with, competition and pressure, and understandably so. And how did you manage to navigate through all of this, if I may ask?
I really love what I do. I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life. And I was lucky enough because of being on movie sets my whole life. And I was always an organizer, whether it was high school, being student body president of my junior high, and then kind of organizing. We made movies in high school, and I was always kind of organizing everything. When I started to work in the business, I started out lucky enough to get a job as a second AD, second assistant director, and then a first assistant. And I found that was really my calling. I loved organizing an entire crew, working, communicating with the director, and really knowing what he wanted. And then I could communicate it to everybody on the set and kind of run things. And that's what I love doing. And so I was fortunate enough at a very young age to work on some of the best films ever made, I think, in the late 60s and 70s. And so I got a reputation. I heard all the stories about Hollywood, and believe me, I got screwed several times by people. But I always felt like, you know what, if you tell the truth and you're honest, you'll get a lot further than trying to wheedle your way in somewhere. I remember early on this one of the first movies I ever worked on, I was told to go get Natalie Wood. Are you kidding? I was in love with Natalie Wood, and I didn't walk from the set to base camp. I ran, and I knocked on her door, and she said yes, and I said, "Oh, we're ready for you," and she said, "Oh, I'll be out in a little while." And I don't know where it came from in me. I was 19 years old, and I said, "Oh, well, James Wong Howe, a two-time Oscar-winning, amazing cinematographer, James Wong Howe said the light is perfect." And she opened the door, she looked at me, she took my arm and walked up to the set and walked over to her co-star, Robert Redford, and the director, the great Sidney Pollack. Everybody came to me and said, "How did you get Natalie Wood out of her trailer?" And I said, "Well, I told her the light was perfect." And it was perfect. But I've used that with every actor for my entire career, because they have vanity. There's always a bit of insecurity having to come out and perform in front of, an entire crew, but to perform and know that, whatever they do is going to be up on a screen or on a video somewhere for the rest of their lives. So there's a bit of insecurity there. And if you can give them confidence and you feel confidence, and you feel like, man, you're doing a great job. That's a great way to be, I think.
And I think in this business, it is so important to really learn the ropes, to work your way up, so to speak. I mean, you just mentioned you had been working as an AD and assistant director, and then you started getting, involved and on a deeper level. And you have been involved in the making of some of the greatest films ever. Like you just pointed out yourselves, in the 60s and 70s, Rosemary's Baby, for instance, The Marathon Man, Chinatown, The Way We Were. How intense was this learning curve? Can you share a learning experience which helped you to become the producer that you are today?
It was on a film very early in my career called Pendulum. I was the second AD on a film. It starred Richard Kiley, and Gene Seberg, and I'm trying to think. Oh, George Papard from Breakfast at Tiffany's fame. And we were filming in Washington D.C. And while the day before we were filming was the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were trying to film the next day, and riots had broken out all over Washington, D.C., and in many places all over the country, all over the United States. And in Washington, D.C., all of the government buildings let out at exactly the same time, at 3:00 in the afternoon. And it was basically the entire city was like a parking lot, everybody trying to get out. And we had to wrap. We couldn't shoot anymore. Because we had to go back to the hotel. The police said, "Get out." And our cars wouldn't work. So the first assistant, a great man named David Salvin, and I had to walk George Papard and Gene Seberg back to the hotel through the riot, which was pretty amazing. But we were there, and the riots went on for a couple of days. And I remember us calling the head of production at the studio at Columbia. His name was John Veach. And we said to John, we don't know how much longer we can sit here just in the hotel, whether or not we're ever going to be able to go back and shoot and finish the job that we had in DC. And John Veach said, you're there, I'm not. You make the decision and I will back up whatever decision you make. And I found that to be a really, really smart thing, because we decided to pull out, go home. We found another way to shoot stuff in Hollywood and make it look like it was DC. And it was the right thing to do, because you couldn't have shot in DC for at least another week and we would have been sitting there. And what I learned is someone that's on the firing line is going to know a lot more than somebody sitting in an office 3,000 miles away. And through my entire career, I've always, because I'm on the firing line, always said to those executives back at the office, listen, if you want to make the decision, then get over here. But I'm on the set. This is what we've got to do. And if you don't like it, then get somebody else. Because the truth is, you can't know what's going on if you're, a mile or 1,000 miles away from what's actually happening on a movie set. So that's one experience, a learning experience.
Great. Thank you, Hawk. And I know that a movie set can be a rather, let's say, explosive or challenging environment. And it's also in your book, Magic Time, that you described a screaming match between Roman Polanski and John Cassavetes on Rosemary's Baby. And if I may ask, and you don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable, have you ever experienced anything like that before? Because you said it was a major outburst.
Yeah. No, I've done over 60 films, and that was the biggest fight I ever witnessed in front of everybody. There's been fights in an office or, and I don't mean fisticuffs, I mean arguments. But this one was in front of everybody. And it really was, for those of you who have seen the film Rosemary's Baby, and if you're a cinephile, I'm sure you have, it's the end scene of the movie. It's John Cassavetes plays a creep, a real creep, who basically allows these witches, these devils, to have the devil impregnate his wife, give up the baby, and he makes a deal with the devil. And he is sitting in the room, in the coven with everybody. And Rosemary finds she hasn't known what's going on until this moment. And she sees the coven and sees her baby in a black cradle. And she looks at Cassavetes. And John did not want the interaction between the two. He didn't want to be there. And Roman said, it's in the script and you have to be here. And they got into it. And I can't describe what went on, but just about every word in the Polish and English languages were used. And what I loved is the wonderful actress Ruth Gordon got between them and said, "Oh, come on, let's make the movie," in her inimitable way, and cooled everything down.
I know that you worked with several first-time directors. I mean, you worked with Warren Beatty on Heaven Can Wait. He directed and starred in the film. You produced Keeping the Faith, which I think was Edward Norton's first-time gig as a director. So how do you walk them through the project as an experienced producer?
Well, I think it started, one of the first-time directors I ever worked with was a man named Robert Benton, who wrote with his partner, Bonnie and Clyde, and then went on to win Oscars for writing and directing Kramer versus Kramer, Places in the Heart. And this was a small film we were making in 1970, I think. It was called Bad Company. And it was kind of an allegory of the Vietnam War. It takes place during the Civil War, the American Civil War. And there's a bunch of kids who are leaving the East, running away from the draft. They didn't want to be in the war and the trouble they get into. And there was a young actor in his second film, shows you my age, second film, Jeff Bridges, who obviously went on to become one of the great American actors. And we had one of the great cinematographers, a man named Gordon Willis, who went on to photograph all of the Godfathers, most of Woody Allen's movies. Just an incredible cinematographer. Again, I just got the chills thinking Gordy. And I was the assistant director. There was a great producer named Stanley Jaffe, who at one time ran Paramount, and Jaffe Lansing went on and made some great movies, including Taps. What's the great movie with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close?
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction, yes. And Robert Benton. And we were going to shoot it in a place called Kansas. Gordon Willis, I was the assistant director, and Gordon Willis said to Robert Benton, okay, for 2 weeks before shooting, you and I, meaning the assistant director, the cinematographer, and the director, we're going to sit down every night after prepping, and we're going to go through the script, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to make a plan. What we did is Gordon Willis would say, okay, scene one, it says exterior, the Missouri River. Now, Bob, do you see it as a wide shot? Do you see it as a close-up of the kids? Do you see it moving? Do you see it stationary? Do you see it high? Do you see it low? And Bob would have to think about visually how he saw filming that scene. Then he'd say, okay, Bob, the transition from scene one to scene two. Do you want to be moving to moving, stationary to stationary, dark to light? And we did that for 2 weeks, so that by the end of the 2 weeks ready to shoot, the assistant director, me, the cinematographer, and the director all knew what Benton wanted visually. So as a producer working with first-time directors, I basically did the same thing with these directors. I would say, hey, let's get on the same page. Let's get the producer, the director, the assistant director, and the cinematographer, and the production designer. I expanded it. And we literally talked through an entire movie so that everybody knew. Communication to me in making a movie, or really making any kind of a job, preparation is everything. If you're going into a meeting not knowing what the meeting's about and you haven't done your homework, you're going to be in trouble. So prep is everything. And then once you prep, hopefully you let everybody know. I'm of the camp that says if there's 150 people working on the movie, everybody needs to know what we have to do that day and what we're going to do tomorrow and what we're going to do the next day, so that we're all ready to make the movie. If the prop man doesn't know that the actor wanted a black pen and all he had was magnifying glasses, no pens, we're out of luck. We can't shoot. It's like there's this great moment where we knew that there's a scene in Chinatown, a wonderful scene, where Jack is in the car and he's looking in the rearview mirror because Mulray is going to get out of his car and he's going to walk somewhere. Jake Gittes, Nicholson, wants to see when he gets out of the car. And we're going to look at through the rearview mirror. Well, what Roman said, and he was very smart, make a giant rearview mirror that can hold the entire lens of the camera. It'll look like it's just the size of a rearview mirror, but in the point of view, it gives us a better focus and a better shot to see what's going on behind us. So we put that big mirror on the side of the car, filmed it, and that was, everybody knew that's what Roman wanted to do, not just on the day, but before we ever started shooting. So Roman always knew. It's one of the great things of working with Polanski, one of the great filmmakers I had the pleasure to work with. Roman really knew what he wanted. And my job as assistant director and then as a producer was to make sure everybody knew what the director's vision was and how to get it and how to be ready to do it.
May I ask you to tell again the story of Nicholson and Polanski and basically when Jack was in his trailer watching the basketball game?
We're filming on the stage at Paramount, and it was a Thursday, and Jack said to me, "Hey, can we get one of those?" This was 1974. One of those little Sony black and white televisions with the rabbit ears. I can plug it in my dressing room. Dressing room was on the set, and I can watch the Laker game when I'm not needed. And so I said, "Oh yeah, Jack, I've got one at home. I'll bring one in." So I brought it in on that Friday, and I gave it to Jack, and the game was going to start around 4:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. It was the Lakers and Boston Celtics from Boston. And now it's 6:30. Every Friday night, Roman would have a party at his house and have a bunch of us were invited and a bunch of his friends were invited. He always had great food and entertainment. One night it'd be Japanese food, one night Chinese food, one night Thai food. This particular night was going to be Mexican food with mariachis and everything. And we usually rapped. That rap meaning, I'm sure, again, you must have cinephiles who listen to this. We were going to wrap around 6:30 and get to his house. Party would start at 7:15, 7:30, and we'd have a great time. So it's about 6 o'clock, and we're getting ready to shoot. It's a very involved shot because it's a shot in the Department of Water and Power, and Nicholson is looking at photographs on the wall of John Huston, who played Noah Cross, and Mulray. And as he's looking, we go from his face to the wall of pictures, and it's so the assistant cameraman has to set a whole bunch of focus marks. And we're finally ready. It's about 6:20, and John Alonzo, the great cameraman, said to me, "We're ready." And I said to my assistant director, "Okay, go tell Jack we're ready." And I'm waiting, and Roman's waiting. We're on the set. My assistant director comes to me and says, "Jack says he'll be out in a few minutes. The Laker game is on." So I said, "All right, well, tell him, let's get the shot. He can go back and watch the game, but we got it's the last shot of the night." She came back again and said, "Jack won't budge." And Roman said, "Howard, would you please go get Roman? Get Jack. Come on, we got to shoot." So I go back to Jack's trailer and I said, "Jack, come on, man, we got to shoot. We're ready to go. We got a party. Let's go." And the door is closed to his dressing room. I said, "Jack, what happened?" He said, "Jerry West hit a shot. We're going into overtime." I said, "Oh, God." I go back to Roman. Jack says, I say to Roman, "Jack won't move." He says, "It's the Laker game and they're in overtime." Roman goes, "Oh, God, I'll go down there." So he goes down. Jack's door is locked now. There's no way we can get in. And Roman says, "Jack, come on. We got to go. It's party time. Come on, let's finish." He says, "I will in just what happened?" He said, "Somebody else hit a shot, double overtime." So Roman says, "Oh." So Roman thinks, I got a plan. He says, "Okay, Jack, all right, I'll wait. Come on, let me in and we'll watch the game together." Jack says, "Oh, yeah, no. Roman says, I swear, Jack, come on, let me in. I'll watch the end of the game with you." Jack opens the door. Roman, right inside the door is the television. He takes the television, Roman does, and throws it across the stage floor, and it breaks into 1,000 pieces. Jack, in wearing in one of those great suits that he wore, takes off the jacket and throws it at Roman and says, Roman, you Polish, blah, 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 blah. Roman he had a sweater on, takes his sweater off, throws it at Jack and says, Polish so-and-so, well, what about you? You American actor, blah, 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 blah. Jack takes his tie off and his shirt off and his shoes. Roman takes his shirt off and they yell and scream at each other till they're both down in their skivvies, their underwear, yelling at each other and run off the stage. Well, obviously, we're not going to shoot, so I yell rap. We're not going to get that shot. Okay, I've lost, my television's broken. And now it's the party's going to happen. And I go up there with trepidation, and I think, Jesus, how are we going to shoot Monday morning? These guys are so angry at one another. How are we ever going to get it made? And I walk up, get to Roman's house, and Jack and Roman got their arms around each other. They got a glass of wine. They're having the best time. And I said, guys, what happened? He said, oh, we got to the corner of Gower and Melrose. Both in cars looked like we were naked in each other's cars, and we just started to laugh of how silly this whole thing was. And I thought, great, okay, well, good. That takes care of it. Except I didn't have a television. Well, 10 o'clock Saturday morning at my house, a guy knocks on the door, and what is it? Roman has somehow found a new, which had just come out, color Sony little television set to put on my breakfast room table, and with a note saying, sorry, from Roman. So that's kind of a fun story.
Hawk, I'm pretty sure that many cinema goers are not necessarily familiar with several producer types and capacities. I mean, there are associate producers, executive producers, line producers, regular producers, and you have worn so many different hats throughout your great career. How would you explain the differences and the nuances there?
In today's world, if you look at movies today, on the big screen, producer is the most important of those. And next to the producer's name, there will be a little P period, G period, A period. It's kind of the good housekeeping seal of approval. The Producers Guild has arbitrated and said that as a producer, you have done a majority of the functions of what a producer does. So let's concentrate first on producer. The producer is the person or persons who come up with the idea. They have an idea, or they read a book, they hear a story, they read a script, whatever it is, they go, oh, that's something that I'm interested in. And they get the rights, or they hire a writer, or they find a financer to hire a writer. They go to a studio with this idea, and the studio likes the idea. Somehow they, what we call, develop the movie. That's the first part. Once it's developed, hopefully they get it financed so they can go into pre-production, which is the hiring of the crew, the getting of the cast. They're in charge of everything. Hiring the director. Then there's the shooting of the film, where the director is in charge, but the producer oversees the whole thing. And hopefully the producer and the director's visions are the same. Movies get in trouble when the producer and the director's visions are different. And that's a big problem. And luckily, I haven't had that many times. And then once the filming is done, there's the editing process. And during the editing process, the director gets 10 weeks to edit, make his cut. They call the director's cut. But during that time, and even before that, the producer is working with the marketing people and the distribution people, figuring out when is the best time to release the movie. what marketing materials are there going to be? How much money how can you get them to spend enough money so an audience knows, that this movie's coming out, and doing all that. So that's all a producer does, oversees all of that. An executive producer sometimes is a production person, someone who comes in after there's already a developed script, there's already a cast, they're going to go into pre-production, and that exec producer kind of puts the crew together and oversees the production of the movie for the producer and for the director. He's sometimes called the executive producer, sometimes called the line producer. There are also executive producers who are people who have the money, who say, I'll put up X amount of dollars, but I want an executive producer credit. That's an executive producer. An associate producer, which there are less of today than there used to be, an associate producer is someone who basically works for the producer. He's his right hand, or his or her right hand person. So those are the kind of the line executive, but producer with the PGA mark that says they actually did the work. What used to happen is somebody could negotiate a producer's credit even though they had nothing to do with producing the movie. And I'm very proud of the fact that myself and my co-president, when I was president of the Producers Guild, Mark Gordon, were able to get all the studios and all the major independents to use the mark, the PGA mark. I'm more proud of that than I think just about anything I've done in Hollywood, in getting that for the rights of the real producer. It's an embarrassment to say that you got a producer credit and you didn't really produce the movie. And by the way, unless you have a producer's mark or the Producers Guild has arbitrated that you were a real producer, if your film wins the Oscar or the BAFTA or the Golden Globe or the Producers Guild Award, you don't get the award. Only the people who actually produced.
In your book, Hawk, you wrote that at some point you felt that producers were not as respected as they used to be. That was related to the fact that Shakespeare in Love won many Academy Awards and actually 6 or 7 producers walked up on stage to accept the award. Is that right?
When Shakespeare in Love won the Academy Award, 7 people got up there to accept the Oscar. And it really said, wait a minute, all 7 of those people really didn't produce the movie. That and the fact that there was a negotiation with the Association of Motion Picture Producers, the AMPTP, which is not individual producers, but production companies, Fox, MGM, Paramount, Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, who gave the writer the credit just before the director. The producer credit was always, it went writer credit, producer credit, director credit at the beginning of movies or at the end of movies, director first, producer second, writer third. Now it's director first, writer second, producer third. So a bunch of us got together and said, I know what a producer does. Without the producer, there is no script. Without the producer, there is no idea. So I fought very hard for this. And I think it was Shakespeare in Love that got all the rest of us producers to say, okay, we got to do something. And I've fought for over 20 years for the rights of producers.
Thank you for elaborating on that. And Hawk, you were also privileged to become the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. What exactly does this job entail, and what did you accomplish in that period?
The Academy gives out something called the Oscar.
Yes.
And so you're head of the Academy, and it's up to you to move the Academy forward. And I'm very proud of the fact that there were a lot of things that I did as president that moved the Academy forward. One of them was to get a green light and get the board to okay, finally, after years and years and years of everybody wanting a real movie museum in Hollywood, we greenlit it during my tenure as president. I'm so proud of the new Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. It's an amazing museum. This museum in Hollywood is the ultimate. You want to know about how movies got started, everything from the ruby red slippers to every Academy Award. We have the Jaws hanging over an area. You could literally put your head in Jaws' mouth if you want. It's a great museum. So I was able to do that. I was able to get, for the first time ever, voting for the Oscar instead of paper ballots, which if you're shooting in Egypt or in Morocco, your ballot's never going to get back in time, to start digital voting, where no matter where you are, you can vote on the Oscars, if you're a member of the Academy. And the Academy, in order to get into the Academy, you must be the best of the best in your particular branch, whether you're a director, an actor, a writer, a production designer, a costume designer, a cinematographer, a sound technician, a vis effects artist, a composer, a songwriter, all of these branches. And so we got digital voting. I put together the first general membership meeting where finally, after all these years, nobody had ever, as an Academy, we'd never had a general membership meeting where everybody got to say and talk about what they liked and what they don't like and what they wanted. I started a real push towards diversity. I was able to give the costume designers their own branch, several things like that. And one of the things I was proud of at the Oscars was there's usually some very pretty lady who would give the Oscar to the presenters to give to the winner of the Oscar. And we came up with, the producers and I came up with an idea of having a film festival of film students all over the country. And they were to submit a less than 3-minute film. And the best of those, we would pick 6 college students that put together a film. What do films mean to you? And they would make a little movie. And those 6 from all over the country and all over the world got to present the Oscars to the presenters and then to give out. So they were backstage. So I was a lot of other things, but very proud of what I did as president of the Academy.
Right, and rightfully so. And thank you, Hawk, for all your great work. Needless to say, over the past couple of days, I tried to rewatch as many of your movies as possible. And you have worked with so many great directors, Gregory Hoblet, you have worked with Michael Apted, and so on. And you've produced movies like Frequency, Primal Fear, The Pope of Greenwich Village, Sliver, the list goes on and on. And who do you think was the most important collaborator of your entire career? Be it a director or a co-producer, anybody who comes to mind.
Well, I was in awe of Roman Polanski. I think the 2 movies that we made together, Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown, are 2 of the best movies ever. So I really enjoyed working with them. I made, I think, 4 movies with Greg Hoblet. So we had a really good collaboration together. Michael Apted and I had a great time making Gorky Park. What you didn't mention is, I think I had the most fun was making a movie called Wayne's World. That was fun. That was really, really fun. My oldest son was working on the film. He had just graduated college, and he was what we call a production assistant. And my youngest son, who was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time, uh, came to the set on a Friday night. And, at 12 or 13, young boys have a lot of confidence, or at least he did. He was going to be terrific in film, and he knew a lot about everything. So he's standing next to me, and it's the scene where Robert Patrick, who played the cop in Terminator 2, if you remember, walking the way Robert Patrick, the cop, walked in Terminator 2, walks up to the blue pacer. Mike Meyers is stopped because the cop has stopped him to give him a ticket, he thinks, or something. And Patrick walks up leans down and looks at Mike Meyers and says, "Let me see your driver's license." And Robbie, who my 12-year-old is standing next to me, he kind of very loudly in front of everybody goes, "Well, that's not funny." Well, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. My son has said this, and everybody turns to Robbie like, who is this kid and what is he doing on the movie set? And Mike Meyers, to his credit, said, "Why isn't it funny, Robbie?" And Robbie said, "Well, because in Terminator 2, he had a Polaroid, the cop did. He was looking for Edward Furlong, the actor who played the kid. And when he saw everybody, he'd always hold his Polaroid up and say, 'Have you seen this boy?' That's what he should say, and everybody will laugh." Well, Mike Myers said, "He's right." And Bonnie and Terry Turner, the writers, said, "Oh, he's right." And Penelope Spheris, the director, said, "He's right." So we did the shot again. They took a picture of my 13-year-old Robbie, Polaroid, and he held up my son's picture in the movie and said, "Have you seen this boy?" And so my son Robbie is in Wayne's World, and every time we'd see that movie, we'd go to a movie theater, it would get a huge laugh at that time because everybody knew because of Terminator 2 at that time. So Robbie said, "Yeah, I knew what I was doing."
Wayne's World is a movie which I still love to watch today. And it was tremendously successful too. I mean, it made quite a bit of money.
Very successful. Very successful, yes.
So Wayne's World 2, I think, was released 1 year after the first, and it was kind of inevitable. It basically had to be done.
Yes, we had a problem. It wasn't as good as the first one. We had a screenwriting problem, which is too long to get into. But we had a script ready to go, and the Paramount lawyers said it was plagiarism. It was too close to an old English film, and so we had to quickly, with only a few weeks left before we had to start shooting, because Mike and Dana had to get back to Saturday Night Live. So it just wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah. Penelope Spheris also didn't return to direct. May I ask why she opted not to return, or was it a scheduling conflict?
Honestly, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But we went with Lorne had worked with Steven Surgic, who was Canadian. Lorne's Canadian, and Steven had done some movies up in Canada, and Lorne decided that he would do it, and Steven and I became very close.
Right, and if I remember correctly, Wayne's World also had a great poll when it comes to test screenings. Do you think that a test screening is basically a necessity, or do you think at times it can do more harm than good, depending on the situation?
No, I think test screenings are very important. Paramount didn't know what they had with Wayne's World, and we had a test screening in, believe it or not, Wayne, New Jersey. And we got 98%, and it was like 96% excellent, 2 very good. No goods, no fairs, no poors. And Paramount went, "Wow, we've really got something." I think test screenings are very important because you learn whatever you think of your movie. What's important is what the audience thinks of the movie. And if you had several test screenings, if there's something glaringly wrong that you didn't see, you have time to fix it. When you're doing, especially with a comedy, I remember doing a comedy called Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks many years ago. Gary Marshall was the director, the great Gary Marshall. And Gary would have 3 or 4 jokes in just about every scene. And we'd put up joke 1 on the first test screening, and then he'd put up joke 2 the second test screening, and we'd see between them which joke worked best. Then in the third test screening, we'd put the best of 1 and 2 together. When you're doing a drama, same thing. You want to see, does somebody want to go out and get popcorn, or is somebody absolutely riveted? Same thing with a horror movie. Are they screaming at the right time? Test screenings are very important.
I believe Ridley Scott once said that test screenings can be a double-edged sword, as the audience may be overly critical of certain scenes and point out to potential problems which don't even exist.
I think we are smart enough and experienced enough to kind of let those go off your shoulder. You can tell when you've got a comedy, if they're not laughing, you're in big trouble. And if they're laughing at the right spots, you know you've got something good. When they walk out of the theater in the test screening and you look at them, if it's a drama and they're talking about it, or they have, you sit in the back of the audience and you see nobody moves for an hour and 55 minutes. You know you got something that, if they're rustling around and they're looking at their phone, and you know you're in trouble. Test screenings are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Or let's say if you have 500 people in there and 400 out of 500 tell you we couldn't follow the plot, that's a major problem.
Yes, for sure.
What do you think is the biggest upside of the business? What is or let's say upside versus downside, something which is really fulfilling, a fulfilling part of the job versus something that may or may not cause some unexpected problems?
Well, I think a lot of us make the mistake of the movie business is everything, and you have to. I think had I to do over again, I would have had more time to balance family and work. But I think that's not just in the movie business. I know making a movie, being in the theater the night the movie opens, standing in the back of the theater. I'm just thinking of Warren Beatty and I when we made Heaven Can Wait, and being in a line around the block, full theater. We're standing in the back. They're laughing. They're having the best time. And you just feel so good because all that hard work, years of putting something together, is paying off. That to me is the most rewarding. I think the toughest thing is when you, at least from a business standpoint, is when you make the movie that you spent your whole life, years of your life putting together. You go opening night and there's 30 people in the theater and nobody's interested in your movie. And you just go, what? I just worked for 5 years putting this together and it's not, nobody wants to see it. That's very painful, very painful.
Allow me to say that, of course, I also rewatched The Temp just yesterday. Neither you nor the director really bashed the audience over the head with a sledgehammer. It wasn't the horror or the psychological aspect didn't kick in at once. It was a rather slow process. And that's also what I love about a good psychological thriller, that it allows the audience to, let's say, embrace the story and there is room to breathe. So that I think is very important. Or also The Long Walk Home, for instance, which I also rewatched just a couple of days ago, I think is a fabulous film.
Very proud of that movie. Very proud of that movie. Primal Fear, same thing, if you're talking about a thriller. Yeah. Very proud of Primal Fear.
Yeah.
And Fracture with Anthony Hopkins and Ryan Gosling. Very proud of that.
Yeah, fantastic film. And allow me one last question, perhaps. What's next for you? What are your future plans? What are you working on?
What's next? I'm working on a couple of films with some great writers and directors. If I get them made, great. It's much tougher to get movies made today. I'm on the board of AMC Theaters, which has some theaters in Germany, I think. I know we have them in Norway and Sweden and England. Uh, and I'm on the board of, I work on several boards. I do a lot of work for the Motion Picture and Television Fund, which is a nonprofit here in Hollywood that takes care of our own. All the people who work in the movies, we take care as they age. We have a home. We give financial assistance. So I'm doing a lot of that stuff. I love giving back to the industry that has allowed me to have the life that I've had.
Hawk, I think we are out of time for today, and I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that. And I had a great time talking to you today, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I did, and to all of your listeners out there, I hope you'll go to the movies. Yeah, you can stay home, but there's nothing like going to the movie theater and seeing it on a big screen.
You're absolutely right about that. And thanks again, Hawk. And I hope we will get to talk again down the road.
We'll see you soon.
Take care. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.